After last week's killings of a senior Hezbollah commander.
The UN announced it has dismissed 9 staff members from its Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, after an internal probe suggested they may have been involved in the Hamas-led October 7th attack against Israel. Gunmen in Mexico shot and killed a crime reporter in the central state of Guanajuato.
Alejandro Martinez Noguez died in Celaya after being attacked while in his car. He survived a similar attack in 2022, the BBC reported.
Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas did not disclose travel aboard a private jet provided by Republican megadonor Harlan Crow in 2010. The Democratic chairman of the Senate Finance Committee revealed in a letter on Monday.
Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon cited international flight records.
The opinions expressed on this program are those of the host or guest and should not be interpreted as statement of fact. Independent fact-checking and corrections are encouraged.
Can we get a cup of coffee in here, please?
Damn good coffee. And hot.
My dog is your mind's best friend.
My dog is your mind's best friend.
Wake up, America. You've got a dog that needs walking. That's right, sunshine. Just put on a big pot of strong coffee and get ready to type your little hate mail with your opinions about kumbaya and flat earth insanity. Stand-up comedy? You want stand-up comedy? Well, we've got sit-down comedy. It's time for Coffee with a Dog. You make me laugh.
I don't know. I just don't know. I got a bad feeling about this one. Go upset. Bad feeling. Bad feeling. Bad. Oh, good morning, America, Canada, and parts of Tanzania. It is Wednesday, August 7th, 2024, Author Hump Day. So go out and hump an author. We got 2 authors for you today. I was under the impression we had a comedian today. We have no comedian. So you make me laugh. No, not really going to happen. Well, not like it happens any other day. Even when we have comedians here, they tend to not make you laugh. You got one job, and that's make you laugh. Woof, woof. Anyway, we'll try to make the best of it. It's Author Hump Day, and we'll be humping authors all day. We'll be humping their books. The first hour we're expecting, and listen, when I say expecting, I mean scheduled. I don't mean really expecting. Emil Arem, who is calls himself an eccentric accountant who became a writer of eccentric characters. Should be interesting. He's a guy who was born in Africa, raised in a foster care facility in England, now lives in Canada. So we'll talk to him. And the second hour, Patrick Greenwood, cycle writer, who has a second book due out, I think in September, first week of September. He was on the program about a year ago talking about his first book, Sunrise in Vietnam now, whatever. Sunrise in Saigon. Sunrise in Saigon, Vietnam. Yeah, it's Vietnam. What do I say? Listen, I've been slacking on reading. I've been slacking on reading a lot, and I got to get back to it. But here's my thing. Since the pandemic, I used to be able to read like a book in a day, like really just like go through it. Now I get 20 pages in and I'm nodding off. And it's not because the books are boring. It's because my capacity to stay awake is waning. I really feel like, and I said this before, I'm not being morbid by saying this. I feel like I'm just like waiting online for death. I'm on the line. And that's not a good place to be. You're on the line for death. I'd rather just like let them find me out in the open. Like I'll just go about my life. But no, I'm like on a line, a long line, like a line at Disneyland to get on the Pirates of the Caribbean, which everybody seems to hate. And they're like, what's up? What are you even online for? You're on the line for something that everybody seems to hate. Just go. Live your life. But so I can't read. That's the problem. I read 20 pages and I fall asleep. Or I watch. Last night my wife was watching a television show. And I sat down to try to watch it with her. And after about 10 minutes, I had to get up and walk away. It's like, is anything going to happen? These people are just talking. Like nothing happens. And I wanted to go to sleep. Because nothing happens. I need something to happen. To jar me awake. Anyway, Stephen, the libertarian Ortiz, must have got his ass hurt, butt hurt yesterday. And will continue to get his butt hurt until he defines libertarianism. I think he's a borderline anarchist, by the way. Borderline anarchist. But yeah, he's crying. He's crying. He said, oh, my computer. Yeah, whatever. We cry babies. And my good friend I Am Blackface is still a little under the weather. I made myself laugh with that. You see that? That's not a good thing. You should never make yourself laugh with your stupid little jokes. But he's under the weather still. I guess this flu thing. Maybe he's got long flu, if you know what I'm saying. Call it what you will. Long boat flu. But we hope he's all right. But listen, having had boat flu and I didn't even go on a boat to get boat flu. I know it can linger. It can take forever to get it. You're like, when am I going to feel better? When am I going to feel energy? And it doesn't come. It's just like, yeah. Mike Chavola's in one of the chat rooms over there. He says he has liberal titus. I'm not sure if I think he's talking about Stephen, the libertarian Ortiz, Stephen, the libertarian sitcom Ortiz. I think that's what he's talking about. Not GD. GD doesn't have libertitis. He's got full communism. I just got a message from Stephen, the libertarian blobbity blue. He says, we lost power last night from storms and it's still out. I'll be on if it comes on. Nah, you won't. You'll never be on. We're not letting you on. We don't have libertarians on this program. Anyway, earthquake last night. I can't believe Kamala Harris. I'm never going to say her name right, her first name. They should just call her Harris. I can't believe she let an earthquake happen. It's just really unprofessional and unbecoming. But, she let it happen, and it's all her fault. And Hurricane Debbie is wreaking havoc. It's been raining here for like my entire life. Every day of my life it's been raining here. Well, maybe that's an exaggeration. Probably since Saturday night. But it's going to rain for the rest of the week here. And I'm not loving that because I have a outdoor gig scheduled for Friday night. And it's probably going to get canceled. So I'm going to cry about that. I'll whine and cry and complain. That's what I do best, right? I want to read to you, in case you didn't know about it. This is a statement from the leader of the MAGA world, Mr. Trump. And this is why I started with a picture of him in a straitjacket. I do think it's time for the men in the white coats to chase him down with the nets and institutionalize them. He says, you know what? Maybe I'll share this while I do. Why don't I share it while I do this? Share screen. Well, you can't share, but bing, bing, bing. How can I not share the boom, bada bing, bing, bing window? Oh, there it is. There's the bing, bang, and the boom, boom. There it is. It says, what are the chances that crooked Joe Biden, the worst, all shouting capitals, the worst president in the history of the U.S., whose presidency was unconstitutionally stolen from him by Kamabla, Barack Hussein Obama, crazy Nancy Pelosi, shifty Adam Schiff, crying Chuck Schumer, and the others of the lunatic left, crashes the Democrat convention and tries to take back the nomination. Beginning with challenging me to another debate. He feels that he made a historically tragic mistake by handing over a U.S. presidency, a coup, to the people in the world he most hates, and he wants it back now. Now, besides the fact that this man is like he try to make sense of how and when he decides to capitalize or shout a word. Biden, the worst president in the history of unconstitutionally stolen. Barack Hussein, left crashes, debate. It's totally nuts. Now, Biden is not. What are the chances that crooked Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of the chances are zero. Biden is not going to try to take back the nomination or run. And it wasn't a coup. It wasn't. This has happened before. This is how democracy works. It's happened plenty of times before where incumbents have decided not to run. And generally, the vice president has the catbird seat for that, but not always. But you know what? If you think the Democratic Party doesn't want Harris, you're not paying attention. They're ecstatic that she's running. Joe Biden couldn't take back the nomination if he wanted to at this point. The people don't want him. The people want Harris. So this idea about it not being democratically chosen, you're fucking out of your mind, man. But this fucking kind of panicking or just complete paranoia or nonsense coming from the man. It's time to fucking lock him up. Put him in a fucking home. He's nuts. Anyway, that's where we are today. We're at a point where it's time to lock up the crazy man. And you know what else it's time for? It's time for our sponsors, and then we're going to meet our first guest. And we'll say hello to Ron, who's the only one who's showing up here. And he's got a flight to catch. He's late for a flight. Anyway, our sponsors today are Daily High Club because they just made a payment. That's why.
With humble East Coast beginnings in 2015, Daily High Club is the premier destination for glass water pipes, vaporizers, and consumption accessories. If you're looking to elevate your smoking game to the next level, you're in the right place. With over 1 million top-quality smoking products sold, and with a growing base of over 10,000 monthly subscribers worldwide, we deliver the ultimate smoking experience. But Daily High Club is not just a retailer, we're lovers of the smoking scene ourselves, working with giants like Tommy Chong, Snoop Dogg, Chanel West Coast, and more. Ready to join the Daily High Club? Let our experts curate your collection with our awesome El Primo monthly subscription box, or grab one of our fun and unique pieces from our smoke shop. Click the link in the description below this video to get this party started now.
Now. It's like that party started now was written by Trump. I don't know. He likes to just shout out words in the middle of a sentence like that. Good morning, Ron.
Morning, Matt. How you doing?
I don't have boat flu.
Yeah, that is true. We are both bird flu free.
Yeah. Are you paranoid at all about getting on a plane with people who might have boat plane flu?
No, I mean, no. I'm gonna go. I mean, I've flown recently, so do I look out for people if they start hacking? Yes, for sure,
Yeah,
for sure.
don't go. Don't people just have no common sense or no courtesy or whatever. They just don't care. They're too freaking selfish. I'm just gonna get on a boat. I'm gonna get on a plane when I know I'm infectious. You don't. It's no mystery. You know when you're sick, and you know when you're contagious. Don't go. Don't get on there. Damn idiots.
Yeah, exactly.
But have you had that boat flu in the past? That boat flu?
Knock on wood, I have not.
Ooh, it's brutal getting over. I know I am blackface is expected to come back here tomorrow, but I'm not holding my breath on that. I know because for me it took weeks to get over boat flu.
Yeah, and really, I mean, take the extra day, GD, and use the weekend, and come back strong Monday instead of half-assing it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You know what? No, the wheels won't fall off if you get yourself better. So whatever. Um, so yeah, you did the doghouse last night.
I did do the doghouse last night, and the AC, they're still waiting on a part. That's
But you didn't need it last night. It was cool last night, right?
no, it was still kind of humid because it was
Really?
humid all day. We did get a good amount of rain yesterday. Actually, it's still kind of drizzling today, but it was kind of humid. But uh, it was standable. But yeah, I had like 6 audience members last night and 3 other comics.
Wow. It feels like fall has already hit here, but that's because of Hurricane Debbie, the tropical storm stuff. You know what? I shouldn't say that. I have the air conditioning still cranking, but to the point where I have to turn the air conditioning off, and then I'm like, wow, it cooled off. It didn't cool off outside. It might still be. I just never get out. So maybe that's the problem. But it's been raining for all my life. As long as I remember, rain been coming down. Anyway.
Yeah, the weather in Dallas is supposed to be like the same that it's going to be here the next few days. Just kind
Really?
of, yeah, low 70s and with a chance of rain every day.
Wow, I bet you they're celebrating that. So that might be good for you. First of all, they might actually come out of their air-conditioned houses and say, "Yes, we can finally get out again." So yeah, that might be good. Do you know if they reach the minimum and you're safe to fly?
Not yet. I mean, we're not going to know until like fucking showtime. It looks like.
Wow. What a bummer, man. Show business is hard. People don't realize show business is hard. I'm not complaining, but the uncertainty. Like I'm gonna lose. I'm certain now. Well, I should check that I'm gonna get rained out Friday night. And you know what? We know that when the schedule is made, that certain dates are not gonna happen. But you look forward to them. Yeah, 66% chance of rain for my gig Friday night. It ain't happening.
Yeah, that's riding the line. You're over 50, so yeah.
Yeah, it ain't happening. People ain't coming out anyway. They'll see that, and so even if it comes off, it's not going to be a great gig. And you know what? It's the last beach gig of the year. So if it doesn't happen, that means the last one was the last one of the year, which is July. I don't know. It's too early for me to end beach gigs. It's Mikey's fault. He should have done it in late August. Anyway, it's time to meet our first guest. Are you ready? Are you excited? Are you?
I am.
This is a self-described eccentric Islami Muslim, originally from Tanzania and raised in foster care in England. He lives in Canada and he works as an accountant and writes creative nonfiction, some of it humorous, or I think pretty much most of it humorous, which is unusual for me to find a Tasmanian Muslim who is a funny guy, eccentric guy. But he's here now. Let's welcome him. Emil, good morning.
Good morning.
Wow, look at that energy in the morning.
Well, I just caught it from you. It's like a virus.
Anyway, good morning. And where are you? You're in Canada now, but what part of Canada?
Let me look out the window. It's a place called Calgary.
Calgary. All right. Now, weather-wise,
It's,
we're doing
yeah.
weather reports here this morning.
Oh
What's
no,
it
no,
like
no.
up there?
I think you should just I should repeat what Josh just said. It's raining, raining, and raining, and the clouds are grey.
Wow.
That's totally unusual for Calgary because it's always sunny out here.
Right. So, tell me about now. Did you grow up in Tanzania?
Well, I grew up, but I didn't grow up very much. I was only 5'4", so what can you do? No, I didn't. I left Africa at the age of 5. My mum divorced my dad, and it was a very close knit Muslim family, Muslim community, and women did not divorce their husbands in 1960, and she did. She didn't have any education, uh, had no real experience in anything, and she couldn't get any work. In the end, she was able to get some kind of work in England, went to England, took me with her, and then realized that she couldn't look after me. And so I ended up from a middle class family with servants and really an easy life into a totally alien working class English family in the middle of a council estate, which is really low housing. And I ended up as being the first colored person, or should I say, person of color, being political, really correct, in an estate of working class, uneducated, white community. So I should fit with Trump immediately. Anyway, mustn't say that.
Wow. So, did that lead to what you self-describe as eccentricism?
Well, the eccentricism really came from my father, who loved his life, enjoyed every minute of it, and he used to play practical jokes on people all the way along. And my mum was extraordinarily ambitious, and she became a millionaire in real estate in England after all of that. And so my life is really, my personality is really split in two. One is if I get my teeth into something, I never let go. I make sure that I'm able to do the best I can and make a success of it. But the other side of it is all that charm and humor I've been able to use in my business and the people around me to make friends wherever I go. So my father worked for the airlines, and I was based in England. Every holiday I got, my father would send me airline tickets, and I would fly. All over the world. I would be on standby at London Airport and I'd have a wad of tickets, but we had no money. All I had was a carry bag with about 2 or 3 days worth of clothes. So then I would get on the plane. I would either have to talk to somebody beside me, get on well with them, and then they would go away and take me home with them, and then they'd show me the city. If not, I would have to sleep at the airport, walk all the way to downtown, and come back again. So that's how I started. But the humor itself was really a way to be able to break the ice, to be able to fit in. So when I was in the council estate, I loved to play soccer, football, and nobody would have me because I was colored. I'd have to wait until there was an odd number of people on the pitch or whatever to play with. But I was very good at scoring goals. As soon as I scored goals, that somebody would come to me and say, "What's your name?" And my answer would be Snow White. Everybody would chuckle away, and then 5 minutes later, someone would say, "What's your name?" I said, "It's M." And after that, I was one of those guys. That I was taken in.
Wow.
Now, it's the same thing in Canada. Although, in England, I found a lot of prejudice in the middle classes, certainly not in the working classes that took me on. Once they took you on, you were one of them. They didn't look at your color. But
Yeah.
when I went to Canada, even in Canada, although people were extremely open and they took me on for whatever I was, there was still that subconscious that we all have, that subconscious, what I think is prejudice. So they would come to me and say, "Well, how many languages do you speak?" Now, I'm Indian, East Indian, and I presume they would have expected me to say, "Oh, English and Indian of some kind," although India has about 50 different languages.
Right.
So I go in there and I'd say, "I speak 2 languages." And they'd say, "Well, what are they?" I said, "English and Canadian." And they just kind of look at me like, "What did I say?" So that's my kind of humor.
That's pretty funny because Canada Canada has French and English. So yeah, but um, you know, I've interviewed and talked to plenty of Muslim people, and I'm not still not sure whether it's Muslim or Muslim or how to say it, but generally not thought of as, I don't think of them as people of color because, and I know your I guess race is not Muslim. Your race is Indian and Tanzania.
I think I prefer Tasmanian, but you go ahead, say
Yeah,
whatever you want.
Tasmanian is Australia, right?
Yes, I think
Yeah.
it is some island off Australia. But it doesn't matter. I think you're just trying to get rid of me.
Yeah, I am, but I
But
don't
I
think of
might.
them as people of color. And I look at you, and you calling yourself a people of color, a person of color, and I look at me, and I think I'm darker than you.
I think
At
you
least,
are, but I didn't want to bring that up. You know, I didn't want to hurt your feelings.
yeah. No.
Well, you know
So
what?
I guess I'm a people of color. I never knew
Well,
that.
you know, when I go outside, it's been a sunny day. Like the last few days have been about, in their 30s Fahrenheit. And and I said, it's so hot and it's so sunny. I said, I've been just out in 5 minutes and look at my color. And they just look at me like, whatever. So
So, when did you become an author? You were an accountant by profession, but when did you decide to become an author?
I started at a very young age. I was around 60. It could have been 61 when I started. And the reason for it was I had a son who was a pain in the neck. And he kept asking me, he was the only one in my family. I'm married to a Filipino that I met in Canada. But he kept begging me, saying, "Well, where do I come from? What are my relatives?" Because I have no relatives in Calgary, which is why I chose Calgary. I wanted to run away from my mum and all my other relatives. Calgary was the only place in Canada where I had no relatives. And then, bit by bit, the eccentrics in my life, like my father or my uncles, and so on, began to die in their 80s. And I felt it was time to be able to go back and honor those memories and those people and also give some kind of a lesson to my son. My sons had all been brought up in a very safe middle class environment in Canada, and they're really good life. And I wanted to let them know the problems that I had as growing up in a child of moving from one culture into another culture and seemingly trying to fit in. So those are some of the reasons why. Now, I didn't know what I could write or what I couldn't. This is my first attempt at writing. So one day, my wife was going to the Philippines. She was taking the kids with her. I joined her there, dropped them in the Philippines, and they were going to stay there all summer. And they were staying with her family there. So she said to me, "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I'm going to write." And she looked at me and said, "What are you writing about?" I said, "Well, I'm going away to Cyprus for 5 weeks while you're in the Philippines. I'll come back and pick you up, but I'm going to sit there and write." Now, why did I take Cyprus and the Greek Cyprus, a little place called Pila, which is a fishing village, about 20 minutes drive from one of their cities called Larnaca. The reason why I went there was British Airways only flew to Larnaca. The Cyprus was split in half, the Greek side and the Turkish side. And Pila was the only village that was closest to it that I could go to. So I go to this village and I order a room for myself for one night. And the reason for it is all of that coast has been taken up by all of the university students in Europe, particularly the Swedes, and they've turned it into a party place. Now, I don't know whether you've heard of a place called Ayia Napa. So, I didn't want to sit there and just have all this noise all around me. So I took a day. That one night took me there. I was there for about 4 to 5 weeks, and I just loved the place. I said, "This is the place I'm going to write to." Now, why did I choose Cyprus? Because they had eccentrics there that reminded me so much of the eccentrics in my life in East Africa, which I used to go back to every summer. So the kind of things they do there is I would get free airline tickets. My father never knew when I was coming. I'd end up getting to Dar es Salaam airport in Tanzania. I had have uncles who worked in the airlines. They would pick me up from the plane. They'd just throw me straight into one of their cars. They'd drive me home, and there it was. It was all done and done. There's no passport. There's no other facilities there or whatever because everybody knew everybody within that community. So now I go to Cyprus, and I'm sitting there waiting for a bus. There are supposed to be two bus lines coming through there every half an hour, and you go and pick them up. And they've got this huge sign with all the numbers and all the times on the sheets of paper, all right, for the next 5 years or something. So I'm waiting there. The buses come. or they don't come. Sometimes they'll come both at the same time. Some of them will come an hour late. Some of them will come 10 minutes early. So I'm there. I picked the wrong day. It's a Thursday. I picked the wrong day. I get on there. I got all these crowd of women with their shawls over their heads, and they're carrying these bags and so on, just empty bags. I say, what are they doing? So the guy says, are you going shopping? Do you just want to go to the Carrefour as usual? Oh, yes, please, if you don't mind. The driver turns around to everybody else and says, hey, guys, is it okay if I take a detour and just go to the Carrefour and drop these ladies? Oh, not a problem, not a problem. So there they go. They drop them off at the Carrefour. And then the driver says to them, well, so do you want me to pick you up in an hour's time? Is that okay? They, oh, yeah, that should be fine. And there you go. Everybody knew everybody within that village.
Wow.
Right. And this was the kind of community we had in Africa. And this is why I so wanted to write. I've been wanting to write since I was a young, very young age. And I love the sound of words. And so this is what they were. And I didn't know what I could write and what I couldn't write. Right. I didn't know whether this thing was just going to be a fad. And after a couple of weeks, I'd give up. So what I did was started with my first short story. So let me take you back to Cyprus. So I land in Cyprus at 7 p.m. I just come out from 3 days worth of traveling. I'm in shorts. My t-shirt is all sticky with sweat. I haven't shaved, right? And so I wake up. I go in there. The first thing I do is just plonk on the bed and sleep. I wake up about, 7 or 8 in the evening local time. I go downstairs to the receptionist and I say, is there a restaurant? I'm starving. And she looks at me. It's the old subconscious prejudice. She says, well, there's an Indian restaurant down the road. Now, there's 100 restaurants between now and there, but she chooses the Indian restaurant. I said, fine. But they said they're high class. I said, oh my goodness. So I walk down the road, I go to this place, and all the rich of Cyprus are coming into this place. All the fancy automobiles with their chauffeurs, everybody all dressed up to the nines, and they go into this restaurant. I go into this restaurant expecting Indians. If you go to an Indian restaurant, do you expect Indians? Do you expect Mexicans? What do you expect? I don't know. So I look for Indians. I'm only an accountant. What do I know? So now I go into that restaurant. All I see are whites. And these guys are dressed like the kabukis in Japan, right? So they've got this thick white makeup on them, and they start speaking. They're like statues. They don't do anything. So I go there. Suddenly, the statue comes alive. Can I help you? And it's Cockney accent, the heavy East London Cockney accent that people in other parts of England can't understand. And she's speaking this. So what happens is Cyprus was taken over by the British. The Cypriots went over to have all their education in England, and they all ended up in this East London. They come back in summer to open up their restaurants for all the tourists to come and see. So I'm sitting. So then they push me into a corner somewhere between some water pipes where no one can see me, because again, I'm just dressed the way I am with my t-shirt. I smell. I got holes in my shoes because I love wearing Crocs. So I sit there and I'm waiting 10 minutes, 15 minutes. All of a sudden, this girl comes to me. She's tall, she's slender, she's East Indian. And I said, where do you come from? I said, are you real? She said, what do you mean, am I real? I said, are you a real Indian? I said, sure, she said. I said, where in India do you come from? She's looking at me like, what the hell am I? She was apparently not the way, she wasn't good enough to be a waitress because she was white. So she ended up as a water carrier. She said, I come from Gujarat. I said, Gujarat, that's where all my ancestors came from. And they came to East Africa to work with the British there as foremen over the Africans. So then she says, where do you come from? Now, I was at a complete loss. Now, I can hardly talk to you now because I'm so shy, right? So I'm sitting there and I said, where the hell do I come from? Now, I'd been in Africa. I'd been in England for 20 years and I love my English family. And I had been in Canada for about 30 years, married and settled. So what do you think the first thing that came out of my mind was?
Brazil.
No, not Brazil. It was close. It was close. I haven't gone to my mosque for 30 years. The first thing I thought of was this beautiful hallway on the second floor, a huge hall on the second floor of a marble building. There are windows, but it's all filigree metal. There's no windows, like panes of glass on there. The doors are wooden shutters. They're all open, and there's this beautiful breeze blowing in. And there was such a sense of peace of mind. So I had gone back to the time when I was in my teens, going with my father to the mosque every evening. We had no television, so this was our entertainment. So we were sitting there on rush mats reading it. And now all of a sudden, I got the idea of writing this book because I wasn't sure what I was going to write about. And the book was going to be called And Where Do You Come From? And so that's how I got my start as to what I was going to write, where I was going to write. So going back to my books, I didn't know what I was going to write. So I only wrote in those 5 weeks. I wrote a lot of pages. I think it would have been about 3 pages and about just under 600 words. And then I left it. I came back to Canada. Didn't do anything else with it. And then, as I said, one by one, my family members died who had great influence on me. So I said, I've got to get this written. I then chose someone that I could meet face to face every Friday. So so over the weekend, I would write 3,000 words, all in 6 to 8 hours. I would then go and visit her. She would go through there, come back and say, well, this could be right, that could be right, and the others could be right, or you could change this. And so we did one chapter, and then we went into a second chapter. Then we went into a third chapter. By the time we got to the fourth and fifth chapter, this lady who had 20 years experience in editing came back and said, hey, you know what? These are good enough to publish. I said, what? They're good enough to publish. You must be crazy. So what she said was, they're short stories. I've got a whole bunch of literary magazines we can send this to and send it off. And that's how this whole thing started from 12 I'm very lazy, so I only did 12 chapters. So I do my 12 chapters. There weren't enough. There's under 30,000 words in there. So I got a friend of mine to do the illustrations, and he did the most fantastic cover that you could think of for it. And then I said, that's not good enough. I've got to write an author's note as well, just to be able to fatten the book up a little. And so I created my own way of writing.
A unique format. Yeah, very cool.
Absolutely.
So you're like an essayist, short story writer, because it's not a novel. It's a collection of short stories, right?
Yeah, but when you read them from beginning to end, they've somehow become a novel. But they're really parables, because you look at something at the beginning of each story. You look at it from a very white, prejudiced, uneducated point of view. And then you turn the story around. By the end of the story, you're beginning to see the other person's point of view. So let me give you an example. On the first book I wrote was called Chasing Aphrodite. That was the one I was telling you about. Where do you come from? And I didn't think it was a catchy title. So I said, Chasing Aphrodite looked good. So we did that. So I'm in the middle of Oman, and I need someone to take me around Oman, a taxi driver to take me around Oman for the day. The capital of Oman is a place called Muscat. So I'm sitting there, and Oman had just been opened, so I'm going into that place. Nobody knows how to speak English. They've all, they find me a cab. The cab is an old battered Toyota. The guy looks like an Arab terrorist. He's got, you can't see his face for all the hair that he has, the beard that he has, great big sunglasses on. He's got the red and white keffiyeh over his head, and all he needs is a Kalashnikov or something beside him. So I'm sitting there. I'm showing him. Well, exactly. I'm sitting there and I'm showing him the Blue and Guidebook. This is where I want to go. Pointing to no. I said, I want to go to the fish market. I want to go to the local eateries. I want to go to the museum, which is one of the best in the area. No. You come with me. You come with me. You come with me. By the time we finished arguing, he'd only taken me to the National Museum. I'd spent about 3 hours there, and he took me back to the hotel. Then I'm giving him the money that we'd agreed on. And the guy says, no. Oh, no. I said, my God, you've only taken me for half the trip, and you want even more money? I rushed into the manager at the hotel. Come and help me. Why does he want more money? The manager talks to the guy, and he says, and he comes back to me smiling. He says, the guy doesn't want the money that you have. I said, why not? I said, whatever. He says, he only wants half the money. I said, what do you want? What do you mean he wants only half the money? He said, because he didn't take you the places he wanted to take you to. You insisted on going to the museum, and he was only there for half the time that you were. He only wants half the money. Now, this is a guy who has a bent up vehicle, who obviously doesn't have enough money. He's most probably supporting 25 kids.
Well, that's why.
But look at it too. But that is what those stories do. They look at it from a typical a white or Western point of view at something, at a particular incident. And taxi drivers are always being complained about. So you go there, but look at the story. And this is a real story. Now, I couldn't shake the guy's hands because he still reminded me of a terrorist, but it doesn't matter. But the point was, if you can go to the world and you can try and see somebody else's point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, let's look at it because by the way, I think this is your latest book, The Vanishing Gardens of Cordova, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, I have that on the screen, and I have your URL going across the bottom, and in the description, if people want to go and check out the books and buy the books, the links are there. On the subject of prejudice, a lot of, because if I look at you visually, I would not know, because there are a lot of, where I come from, a lot of people look like you. A lot of people.
Oh, well, that's not very good.
The the accent, the English accent says, well, if he looks like that and that accent, he must be Indian. So go with me here. If you could do a Brooklyn accent instead of saying, "Dear lady, is there a restaurant? I'm starving." If you could say, "Hey lady, is there a place to eat around here?" If you could do that, they look at you and probably think you're a guinea from Brooklyn.
I think you're right, but I'm very shy. I could really go to people and talk to strangers. You know what I'm like. You've seen me on the stage here, but there are different kinds. I just wrote. I just wrote what I call an analect, but it's a blog every week. My guys in the States wanted me to write these blogs every week. And I thought, what the hell am I going to do? But you know what? I love writing these things. So my latest one is called Pride, Prejudice, and the Efficacy of Brown Humor. So I relate the story about the playing football in there. And then I say I went into accounting in England, and it was the worst ever because they were middle class. They spoke absolutely perfect English, and I was still the little estate, Cockney estate kind of a guy where I was living, right? And everyone bases you on your accent. Okay, so now I'm sitting there and I'm going with these middle class guys, and they were extremely polite. But you know what? As polite as they were to me, I was never invited to any of their squash games. I was never invited to any birthday parties. I was just left on the shelf. I couldn't even use my humor to be able to win these guys over the same way as I had done to my estates. So what do you call prejudice? People can call you all kinds of names, and then you one of them. Then they'll talk about wogs and packers in your estate there, and they look at you. They look at me like I'm white. And if I had any problems anyway, they'd come to my assistance. I was one of the lads because I could score goals, right?
Right.
Now I come to Canada, and the third part of this was how the Canadians saw me. Even though they're so open and everybody's equal in this place, there's still that whiff, that little residue of prejudice is too strong. But the fact that they look at you and then they look at East Indian or whatever, and then they ask you what kind of languages do you speak. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a distinction between prejudice and bigotry.
Yes, that's
Bigotry,
exactly it.
yeah. I
I'm gonna
think prejudice
Yeah.
is kind of like a natural human instinct, and I think it evolutionary wise, it was a good thing. I mean, to be able to look at things and say, well, that's dangerous, and that's not, to prejudge something as dangerous or not. So it started out as a good thing, but it can lead to bigotry. So.
It not only it leads to bigotry, but bigotry also has a price to pay down the road. We were in East Africa. We had a close community. The East Indians had servants. The servants you paid, 2 cents to, and you gave them the back of the shirts that were all torn, and they would wear those. They'd eat the leftovers of your food outside, in the kitchen, and they thought this was, wonderful. But that prejudice got us East Indians kicked out of Africa in the 70s, in the time of Idi Amin and all of these other things, simply because we treated them as servants and didn't pay them any attention or respect. So one day when I'm traveling to Africa, I'll give you another story. So one day I'm traveling to Africa, and one of my dad's friends, takes me on a dhow to Zanzibar. Now Zanzibar had a leader who was African but loved Asian women. So he would go out, whatever Asian women he liked, he would just marry them under the Arabic law, and that was the end of it. So everybody, all the Asians left Zanzibar, and there was no trading in Zanzibar. No Asians went there, but this Asian went there. We went by dhow across the water. It's about 20 miles away. We go into that, and I'm saying, where are we staying to this friend of ours? He says, oh, we've got a place. He takes me to the African quarters, and I'm living for the first time as equals or guests to the Africans. I'm saying, hey, what are all these people? I said, where are we going to eat? Oh, they're going to cook for us. I said, but the guys try and poison us. They don't cook. They're lazy. I said, well, you just stay here for a while. So he takes me into my own room. And I said, well, where do I put my money and my passport? Just leave it on the side of the bed. What's the big deal? I said, well, there's no safe. Where's the lock to my door? I mean, so even though I come now to a world where I am now looked possibly down on by my color or whatever the deal is. Yeah, this is what we practice without even thinking at that
Right.
time with the Africans. So now it's all payback period.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, though. I mean, especially being in a place that is strange to you. You're not comfortable in the place.
It was the
Uh,
Africans. It wasn't the place.
oh,
And
really?
we would walk around in on the mainland. We have to close our doors by 7 or 8. We'd have 3 or 4 sentries around. You're not allowed to go out because there's so many robberies and fight and all this stuff. Over there, we were walking around at 1 or 2 in the morning. They're a little Arab town, which means they have very narrow streets, no lighting. We go and see a late night Indian movie, and we come home. There was no problem. We were treated with so much respect. There was so much dignity in these Africans.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you see a totally different world. That's what I love about my writing.
right.
I'm able to see the other side of things.
Right. Well, you know what? We have something in common in that I was a vagabond who flew for free on standby all over the world when I was a kid
Wow.
too. But I had places to go. I did not have to. I did not have to meet strangers and kind of acclimate myself to those people. I had people wherever I went, wherever I flew to around the world. I had a destination. It wasn't like I was until I was 13 and left home on my own and did not have any destination at all. I was a runaway, and that was kind of that experience of meeting strangers and having to ingratiate myself to them and all that kind of
You
stuff.
know,
But
the book is, even though all this happened 30 or 40 years ago, the book, I am amazed at. When I went there, as I said, I had no camera, I had nothing. So I didn't realize, but my mind acted as a video camera. It would take these things around me, at that time there were no guidebooks. So all I do is walk around town, walk around town. I'd walk in one part of the poorest town. The next minute there was this huge temple or a palace or something that you saw out of nowhere. I had no clue what these things were. When I wrote those books, I wrote in a third person, so I didn't write anything about myself or describe myself. I described the eccentrics along the way that I met that held me. I ate the local food because I couldn't afford anything else. I just followed the locals as to where they and ate their food. All of that translated into my book, and I was so happy when I met them when I had my first editor that she allowed me to write in that third person video perspective.
very
And I
cool.
was so and that's how I wrote about these guys.
Let me ask you about the title and the cover here. The cover, I'm not sure what I'm looking at. It looks like a collection, like a mosaic. I have a friend who deals in antique rugs and that kind of stuff, and his collections often look like the cover of this book.
Oh,
What do
you
you
got to
tell?
meet him. Okay, so the story is about the gardens of Cordoba. When the Arabs came in from Africa and they took over at least half of Spain for 400 years. They did not like the desert. They loved gardens. So they built one of the greatest gardens in the world. Arabs from all over the world came to see these gardens because they were a reflection of what they considered heaven. So now, when Arabs moved to Mecca on their pilgrimage, this is where they would go to do. They would go to Cordoba, and so this is where it comes from. The pictures that you've got at the front is I have this fantastic illustrator who did this, and her name is Laurie Hansen. So what she did was she picked up all of the mosaics that were in that building within those gardens and put them all on here. And the flowers that she put beside them and the name of them are the flowers that actually still grow within that garden, and it's still
Wow.
beautifully kept.
Very cool. We've learned something here today. That
Well,
doesn't happen every single day on this program,
well, I
although we aim to.
well, I was told since the age of 13 to the age of 36, I was a total failure. I was an accountant, but I couldn't add up. I must be about the only accountant in the world who can't add up. Yeah,
Wow.
whatever I did was wrong. And it took a real turnaround. What was the turnaround in your life? You said, you went from 13 to nowhere to what you got now. What was it? Was there one turning point in your life?
There's so many. I mean, everything was mistakes.
And that's
um,
what I say too.
but for me, it's an odd, long story, and I'm not sure how much time I have for it. But I'm trying to think, how can I make this as quick as possible? I was pretty much going from dead end career to dead end career, and not making a lot of money. And then one day, I happened to get to a corporation that didn't know what it was doing as far as the hiring process, and I ended up, and it's kind of, if I say it in the short form, it sounds ridiculous. I hired myself into an executive position within a corporation that the CEO didn't know if I was really there. I was doing freelance. I just started sending them bills, doing freelance work. Eventually ended up as a junior vice president in a corporation by default. He just comes here every day. Oh, I guess you're going to run our new department. And then it just escalated. And it was like, I don't know if you're familiar with the book, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying.
Yes,
It
yes,
was
yes,
like
of course,
that.
of course.
I just, it was a super fast escalation from walking in the door, hiring myself, to being a top executive within a corporation that had 37,000 employees.
Oh my God. But do you call that destiny? Do you just call it just luck, or what do you call that?
Having a very charmed, ridiculous kind of life. But yeah,
And
I
I
feel
feel that way too.
more like destiny, fate, but not in a necessarily like there's somebody planning it out. It's just the weirdest things start happening in your life when you live like a vagabond, and you live without really. You live like a feather on the breeze, and you never know where that breeze is going to take your life. That's the kind of stuff that will happen to you, I think. And so it
You know,
seems
you
like,
know, do you know what the definition of failure is? Right?
no.
Okay. So in my eyes, having been battered by a hammer for whatever 36, 37 years, and then saying, "Hey, I don't want any of this. This is what I want to do, and get on and do it." It wasn't writing books at that time. It means that you are unorthodox or unconventional, because 99% of the people will lead the same life over and over and over again. If you fit into everything that they do in the way that they do it, you're a success.
Right.
If for some reason you don't have it, you're a failure. It's not that you're an eccentric. It's not that you're unconventional. You're a failure. And most people who are listening to this, I pray that you understand what that definition of so-called failure is, because it's not a failure. It means you're doing something right. You're actually pushing this huge weight of humanity in a different direction, no matter how slight or small it is. And then once
Yeah.
you start doing it, it's like a stone that's rolling down a hill. It gains its own momentum, and suddenly you're doing things that are impossible, just the way that you did.
Yeah. I appreciate that perspective on life, because I'm at the age now, and it looks like you are too, where we are looking at the downhill side of life. Not
Oh,
necessarily that means a bad thing, but the part where you have a lot more behind you than you have in front of you.
well, it's a matter of assessing what you've had and what you've learned. And you know what? I wouldn't change one day of it. But I do resent this thing about, well, we're going downhill, because I'm 60. I was 69 this June, and I've still got at least 18 months to go. So I don't know why you say that. Everything else is going
Well,
go on the way that it is.
downhill is probably not the best way to put it, but I do, you know, uh, that's definitely the idea that there is more behind you than in front of you.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely. But now is the time to
yeah.
be able to assess that and learn the lessons and pass those on.
Stephen is joining us. I guess he got his power back, or he got his butt stopped hurting from me calling him a libertarian or whatever, borderline anarchist, whatever I call him.
Joke's on
Are
you. I'm a glutton for punishment, and I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, okay. You're a masochist.
Yes,
that's what you're doing here.
And a sadist.
Let me, has there been? Is there any place in the world you haven't been and would really like to go?
None. We haven't
Lithuania.
traveled. We haven't traveled for 3 years now. My wife's got itchy feet. My kids are saying, "Let's go somewhere." I said, "You know what? I'm happy. I'm traveling every day with my writing." So no, I'm content with what I've done in my life. I'm content with myself.
Okay. Your previous book was Heart of New York.
Yes.
Have you been to New York? Spent time in?
That was our story. I took the whole family to New York. Every Christmas, we're lucky enough with the work that I do, other than writing, we always go to the Bahamas for Christmas, to the Atlantis there. And now my son at that time was a rapper. My father in Africa always made me promises just to make me happy, but never kept any of them. So I felt that in whatever promise I gave to my kids, I would keep. And this kid wanted to be a rapper, and he wanted to go to Harlem, and that was his thing. And he wanted to go at Christmas time. It was the worst season you can go to in New York. And so we ended up there. And I just didn't want to go there. I got there, I was so miserable. But you know what? I found so many good people in that place. Mainly, if you think the worst of something and something isn't worse, is it maybe just bad, you suddenly think, hey, you know what? These guys are great and I like them. But my whole world turned around in those 2 weeks when we were in New York over Christmas, because I saw the kindness and generosity of people. They may be gruff on the outside, but they really cared. When you needed help, somebody was always there to help you.
Yeah,
Really lovely people.
I think you just hit it at the right time of year when people are. Christmas is a very weird time of year. Obviously, there are people who love it and are full with joy and the spirit of the season, and there are people who get depressed by it. But I think, as far as New York goes, if you're going to be in New York, that's the time you're less likely to see the grumpiest, the New York attitude come in. Go in the heat of summer, you might find it very different. Yeah, and I'm from here, so I can
Yep.
say that we are grumpy people. That was interesting to me. And now the In Search of Aphrodite, or wait, Chasing Aphrodite.
Sure.
Like I called I said Tanzania was Tasmania. I was thinking it was in Chasing Aphrodisiac.
I should change that name.
Yeah, like it, yeah. So I thought it was like a sexual thing. Anyway, so the humor part of it, is there humor incorporated into all your writings, or do you?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, yes. Even in the hardest parts of my life, because they're really chronicles of my life story. So even within that, there is humor. There's always humor, and that's what's really got me through the worst in life. You got to have humor.
I agree. Any inclination to take this like into a performance art, like talk?
I'd
Uh,
love to do that.
oh yeah.
I'd love to do that. There used to be a fellow many years ago by the name of Peter Ustinov, and he would do these one-act shows, Voyage Around My Father. I would love to do that. Sure, I would.
And Spalding Gray, who was a hero of mine,
Yeah.
unfortunately, he was a depressive guy and ended up taking his own life. But he was very humorous, and he wrote these stories, and he would read them on stage. And then people would think, well, who's going to pay to see somebody read? But it was a fascinating one-man show watching somebody take you through their literary work. And
Have you heard of Charles Dickens?
yeah.
And you remember how many people, thousands upon thousands of people, came to see him at one reading.
Wow. I did
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
know he did like
That's where he was really. That's why when he came to the States, for instance, that's all he would do.
Interesting
Yeah.
stuff. So this book has been out since December of this year, right?
The last book, yes,
Yeah,
the Gardens have been out since then
right.
too.
So are you working on anything now currently?
Yes, I'm working on a book on the Bahamas, and it's called Journey Cake. Now, the reason I always work from a title and then the story comes along. I never wanted to write about Bahamas because to me it was like Disneyland at Christmas time. You go into a place that's full of tourists, you don't really see anything local in there. However, whenever we used to land on this island called Paradise Island in the Bahamas, the first thing we did was go to a local restaurant. The only local restaurant on the island was called Anthony's. They would give you Cuban soup, bean soup. That's what was my favorite. And they'd have this beautiful sponge bread, which they called Johnny cake. And I said, well, where does Johnny cake come from? Nobody knew. Anyway, I was sitting at a dentist and had known about a year ago, and I discovered that it wasn't Johnny cake. It was called Journey cake. The Bahamas had islands about 700. So when people used to go from one island to the other, they didn't know what to expect. So they would take this journey cake, which is a sponge, an inch thick sponge cake, and in it was filled with all kinds of vegetables, peppers, olives, whatever you could throw into there, and that would keep them in food for at least a week to 10 days. So I
Kind of
called
like
it journey cake. So then,
Stephen carries cupcakes in his belly button.
well, exactly. I keep them in my
No,
stomach.
I carry them under my
Delicious.
boobs. Under my boobs. Yeah.
You know, he's been really quiet and giving me the time to speak. I love that. Thank you, Stephen. So anyway, so we go back to the Radishans. Everything I do is contrast and comparison. So I said, okay, so I'm writing the stuff about Bahamas. What am I going to compare it to? I've already written about my past life. I've written to my experiences in accounting. I've written about whatever. So I said, okay, I'm going to compare and contrast to why I got into writing. My last 7 years of meeting all these eccentrics, learning about the business and the writing. I'm meeting the weirdest of people who were trying to help me, who were working from the basement. My books were published in the bedrooms of somebody's home. They were not things I could have easily taken to a publisher and sent out to China to have done. I wanted local people to be involved and do the illustrations and everything else. And I was really very blessed in finding those people eventually.
Wow. It's the very, I mean, as I'm compelled because, first of all, I mentioned before you came on this morning that I have trouble. I used to read a book a day, but I have trouble now long term. So I read 20 pages and fall asleep. So short stories are my thing now.
You know what the beauty of it is? They're short stories, but they're a book. But they're really each chapter is a short story published all over the world, from all the way down to New Zealand. But the beauty of this is, if you don't like one chapter, you can go to the 10th chapter and look at it. If you don't like one country, you can go to the next one in the next chapter.
Yeah,
and they're all stories within themselves.
You're a fascinating guy, but the books, I was going to say, they look like, I would say, if just by looking at them, I would swear you were published by a traditional publishing house.
No,
because they really look, your covers look amazing. And
you know,
really well done.
amount of time that went into doing those covers. Like the first book, which is the Chasing Aphrodite, has got icons on there. Each icon relates to a chapter. So when you read the chapter at the end of the book, you go back to the cover, which you'll never do in any other book.
Yeah.
And I told everyone to do what they wanted to do, illustrate the way they wanted to. It was their own book. Nobody had given them that chance before. That's what they came up with.
Right, and I like the fact, because I work similarly in writing music. Is I almost always come up with the title, or at least the foundation of what I think is going to be the hook to the song, and work from there. And you work the same way. You basically start with the title of the book and create from there.
Right.
And there's not any one creative process, but that's the one I've fallen into that I feel like it's the most productive for me. There are times when I don't follow that, but for the most part, I like to follow that because it sets the whole ball in motion once you can start from that place. So we have that. We have a lot in common, and I appreciate you being here this morning.
Well, thank you.
You've been a good guest, and do come back sometime. I appreciate it.
I would love to come back, perhaps in about 15 minutes once I've had breakfast.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye. The eccentric Emil Rem, folks. Good morning, Stephen. You got blown away by a storm, did you?
Yeah, but we're good. We lose power just randomly. Yesterday, we lost power. Yesterday or 2 days ago, we lost power, and it wasn't even storming. So
stop complaining. You're just always complaining. You're like a complaining little. For a positive guy, you're very complaintful.
I know.
All right, I'll give you something to complain about. Here's the news.
Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas did not disclose travel aboard a private jet provided by Republican megadonor Harlan Crow in 2010, the Democratic chairman of the Senate Finance Committee revealed in a letter on Monday.
Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon cited international flight records from U.S. Customs and Border Protection showing that Thomas and his wife Ginny flew from Hawaii to New Zealand on Crow's private jet in November 2010 and returned a week later. Jim Kender reporting.
Gunmen in Mexico shot and killed a crime reporter in the central state of Guanajuato.
Alejandro Martinez Noguez died in Celaya after being attacked while in his car. He survived a similar attack in 2022, the BBC reported. At the time of his death, he was under police protection, and the officers ineffectively returned fire at the attackers. Martinez was known by the nickname El Hijo del Llanero Solitito, which translates to the son of the Lone Ranger in English. Paul Gomez reported.
The UN announced it has dismissed 9 staff members from its Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, after an internal probe suggested they may have been involved in the Hamas-led October 7th attack against Israel.
The UN Secretary-General's office disclosed the decision in a brief statement to journalists on Monday. It did not detail the UNRWA staffers' alleged roles in the attack. The 9 included 7 employees, previously terminated over the allegations. Benjamin Wright reporting.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken, calling it a critical moment, urged parties in the Middle East to work towards easing tensions.
Concerns of a broader regional conflict are rising after last week's killings of a senior Hezbollah commander in Lebanon and Hamas's top political leader in Iran. We are engaged in intense diplomacy, pretty much round the clock. Escalation is not in anyone's interests, Blinken said at a signing ceremony with his Australian counterpart. Liam White reporting.
This is the latest news headlines.
I don't know. I think a shitty face. Constipated face. That's my intense diplomacy look.
Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson's Los Angeles home was recently burglarized, law enforcement officials reported.
The incident, which occurred a few weeks ago but only came to light Monday, was the latest in a series of home burglaries.
Tom Hanks got robbed. You care? You care about Tom Hanks getting robbed?
Not really. I mean, at this point,
why is that something we need to know about? Like, if I got robbed, it wouldn't be on the news. But he gets robbed, it's on the news? Because he's somebody and I'm nobody? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, exactly that. 100%. Also, I was going to say, our last guest there really looked a lot like you, just a little more tan.
No, a little less tan. That's what I was saying to him, because he was talking about prejudice, and I said because people always pick him out as an Indian based on what he looks like, and it's not based on what you look like; it's based on his English accent. You see somebody who looks like almost my skin color, and he starts talking with an English accent, you assume he's probably from India or that part of the world. And I said, well, if you could just say it in Brooklyn, like he went up to a lady in a restaurant and said, "I'm starving," or whatever, and just say, "Hey, lady, is there a place to eat around here?" They would say, "Oh, you're from Brooklyn. You look like a
You
wop."
do have an accent. That's adorable, you little otter bastard. Hey, listen, the reason I brought it up though is because I thought it would be awesome if we found somebody from like every country in the world that looks like you. If they don't have a mustache, we send them a fake mustache, and then we get Napos around the world.
And Napos, there are Napos. I mean, this look is definitely, people think I have a unique look, but it's not a unique look. It's actually a very common look. There's a lot to, I have
That's
lots
what I'm saying. I would love to see all the different flavors of Napo, but the only one that really concerns me would be the one from Germany, because I don't think his mustache is wide enough. But the rest of them,
Robert Klein said I look like Himmler, and somebody else said I look like the Emperor of Japan at the same time, and we put them together, and they actually do look quite alike, and they all look like.
I kind of see that. Yeah, that's. Ooh. Ein Kampf, am I right? All right. Anyways, let's go on to our next guest.
Not yet. We have a couple of minutes here.
We do have a few minutes.
Elon Musk is suing people who refuse to advertise on Twitter.
Well, I'm the richest man in the world. Let me sue just, anybody that I could just buy their life.
Well, I was going to say I'm going to sue everybody who's not advertising on this program. Is that the way it works? If people refuse to buy into your whatever you're doing, you can just sue them. It's not fair. You're not spending money.
I say we sue the no-shows first, and then we go on to the non-advertisers.
Well, we could sue the listeners for not buying the advertised products or sending us money, not sending us, you're not sending
Ian,
us money.
Hear that?
PayPal.
Hear that, Ian? Hearing from our lawyers.
Class action suit against everybody, all 8 billion people on the planet. Class action suit.
He should worry about taking care of his kids.
Ooh, I wanted to talk about that last week because he said his trans daughter is dead to him. It's like, that is the worst fucking parenting ever. Your kids are going to do things that you don't agree with, but they're never dead to you. I think I talked about even Jeffrey Dahmer's father still loved him, even though he found out he was murdered.
I'm gonna disagree with you just a little bit, like I did last time. There's a few extenuating circumstances that I would absolutely disown my child for.
Then you're disowning yourself. You might as well just off yourself at that point.
I mean, it depends on what my kid does. I might have to if it's bad enough. No. I mean, to be responsible for creating a monster that, destroys children's lives forever or murders people or, like
Jeffrey Dahmer's father did not want him out of prison, and he didn't want him. He knew that he had to be locked up, and what he did was horrific and all that stuff. But
that's because he was partially responsible for the development of Dahmer being Dahmer. That's what he gets for introducing them into taxidermy at 4 years old.
You have to take that as part of.
You can't disown your child if you hold a hand in the responsibility for creating the monster that they became. But like, if I gave my kid a completely normal upbringing, and he goes around and starts molesting kids, I'm disowning that kid, 100%.
If your kids end up being trans, you're gonna disown them?
No. I said there's a couple very extreme circumstances that I would go that route. But that's not one of them. My kids do in their personal life, in their bedroom, who they want to be called, whatever. I mean, go for it. Anything outside of a furry, as far as that's concerned, I'm cool with. If they come out being a furry, I'm punching them in the head. Anything else is cool, though.
Well, we know that Ron would be okay with even the death penalty for his kids because he's chomping at the. He loves the death penalty. He wants to see it implemented for shoplifters. Right?
No. That's a bit extreme, isn't it?
That's
look, the extenuating circumstances I'm talking about is like, being a sexual predator, especially with children, just frivolous, unsolicited murder for no reason. Like those two things are like really it, like, and being a furry. Anything else is cool. Well, yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah. No, my kid would come home and say, "Dad, I identify as gender fluid 10W30 or whatever it is," and I'd be like, "Okay, cool."
Where do you buy this gender fluid? Is gender
I'm
fluid?
assuming AutoZone, but I don't know. So,
all right,
probably next to the gender fluid.
Before we meet our next guest, before you guys meet our next guest, I've already met him. I'm gonna go ride a bike while we play this. The shores of Okinawa. I love that. Good morning, Patrick.
Good morning.
Greenwood.
Good morning, dog. How are you?
I'm good. You know what? I like the idea that you do trailers for your books. It's not like many authors do that, but I wish I could play that for every author that comes on the program.
Yeah, that
have
was
a trailer.
neat. I like that.
Thank you.
Very cool thing. Shores of Okinawa, which is not out yet. Which I don't know if you sent me the cover of the book, but I went looking for it to be able to place it, and I didn't have it.
Yes.
So, yeah.
It actually is due out Labor Day weekend on Amazon.com. So there's the cover right there. So it has a kind of the shores of Okinawa, which is actually, I took this picture in Okinawa. It has a Bitcoin symbol. And as you can tell, there's some like blood in the water type of thing. So it kind of leaves a little bit of a mystery through the book as well. But it does have a lot to do with hacking and a lot of it obviously to do with some really bad people doing some really bad things and good guys coming to the rescue.
Right.
So, Pat, what it looks like you did is you created a book that was made to be judged by its cover.
Yes.
All books are judged by the cover, and I think we discussed that the last time. It's a cliche that you can't judge a book by a cover, but everybody does. Everybody
does. Yeah, crazy thing.
Now, did you bicycle across Japan, all the islands of Japan?
Yes, I bicycled in Okinawa and Japan as well. It was part of the writing experience because remember from my first book, I cycled in Vietnam.
Yes.
But this one, I definitely was out cycling. I took lots of pictures and did some video and things as well. But the storyline really is a part 2 of the first book. And it does take place both in Taiwan and in Okinawa as well. And as you can see by the cover and Ortiz is right. People look at the cover and have a pretty good idea of blood in the water, a little bit of Bitcoin, and obviously some techno things at the top as well to kind of set the tone.
Now, how do you research hacking? I mean, to write this and make it accurate. I got the Amazon link in the description to your author page where the new book will be out, but the previous book, Sunrise in Saigon, is available now on that Amazon page. How do you research hacking? Are you a hacker? Do you know about hacking? How do you know?
Am I part of the dark science of art of hacking? Well, so you know me as Patrick Greenwood, but my real name in real life is John Gormley. I do actually write under that name as well. I was in tech for 28 years. So I worked at Cisco and IBM, and I worked in several startups in cybersecurity. So a lot of the book really kind of drew from my real life experiences of being in technology and cyber, everything from, Russia hacking Ukraine and China hacking Taiwan and Vietnam hacking North Korea. And so a lot of those kind of stories that are in the book, it does kind of reflect a little bit back from my experiences being on not so much on the hacking side, but on the counter hacking side. When someone gets hacked, I was somebody they would call and say, hey, would you come in and figure this out? And how the hell did it happen? And then later on in life, I became a tech sales executive where I would sell technology to help prevent some of this stuff from happening.
Wow. And you're a coffee enthusiast. All of those.
Yes. Yeah, that too. Still have a coffee, yes.
Before we go any further, I want to ask you about this. The movie Leave the World Behind was filmed in my neighborhood. Now, that doesn't mean anything to anybody. But the story behind that, I don't know if you're familiar with the movie, Ethan Hawke and Julia Roberts. Basically, they start seeing things like ships not being able to, ships running up on the beach because their navigation equipment just fails and all that stuff. A couple of weeks ago, we had the CrowdStrike thing, and people were calling that like a possible cyber terrorist act and all that kind of stuff. How vulnerable, from your perspective, how vulnerable are we to something real like that happening, where nations, whether it's China or Russia or whoever, can just bring down the entire cyber infrastructure of the United States?
It happens every day. And it happens at the financial level every day. It happens in hospitals. Every time you read the story that, 2,000 medical records were stolen from a healthcare provider last week, that wasn't somebody who just walked in and knocked on the door and grabbed a bunch of paper files and ran out the door. It was somebody who compromised their electronic medical records.
But not necessarily a foreign entity, right? Or am I wrong?
No, that was definitely a hack. Then you also have the Colonial Pipeline hack that happened a few years ago, where they tried to shut down the gasoline, in the East Coast. That wasn't accidental. That was intended. Anytime that you see something like a story that hits the internet and everyone went, "Whoa, where did that come from?" That's probably somebody who hacked into somebody's email or into somebody's personal files and found a way to sort of want to either extort them, which is what ransomware does, it sort of extorts people. So there's a lot of extortion that happens every day. The most vulnerable thing that's happening right now is really attack on critical infrastructure, oil, gas, solar, all the power grid things. Those are things that, are constantly under attack. We don't read about a fraction of the things that really go on, like when somebody actually shuts down the city and they say, "Oh, it's just an outage." No, probably I would say better than 70% of the time, it's probably some cyber attack.
That's pretty scary stuff to hear you say that stuff. No, it doesn't make it easier to get through the day knowing any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your guy Jack Higgins is kind of it's kind of like Tom Clancy's Ryan, right?
Yes.
Is there that guy protecting our superhero, cyber superhero, protecting us from this kind of stuff in the real world?
Yes, there is. There's the CISA, which is our cybersecurity part of the government that is well armed with incredible talented people. Many corporations hire ex-military people, ex-Israelis that are experts in cyber terrorism, work for Microsoft, they work for IBM, they work for Intel. And more importantly, we're also educating a lot of students in STEM programs, which is science, technology, engineering, and math programs, to raise more students to get into the cybersecurity field. Right now, the employment in cybersecurity worldwide is less than 1%. So when I meet college kids that are like, "What am I going to do with my life?" I'm like, cybersecurity is the way to go. There are so many job openings. There's so many opportunities. It's the wave of the future. So the great thing is that we have a great part of our government that invests billions on cyber protection. We also have, as you probably were going to read in the book, don't want to give too much away, there's a lot of offensive cybersecurity resources out there in the world that actually will attack on behalf of us, or will attack them as well. So the whole underground dark arts of hacking works both ways. We're getting hacked, at the same time we're also doing some hacking as well.
All right. Well, now that is an interesting thing. Now, again, and I don't want you to give away too much in the book, but the idea of training somebody and getting them good at offensive hacking, that could backfire on you, because people can flip. And we see that with military people. When people get out of the military, snipers and stuff, we've trained them to be deadly killers, and now they will flip to the dark side. There's always that kind of, how do you know who's really not worthy, who you can trust to train in offensive cyber warfare?
It really comes down, and I do cover this in the book as well, that there's part of the book where Jack Kindle and his son actually reach out to the Yakuza and say, "Hey, we're in your part of the world. We need your assets. We need your cyber terrorism resources to help us." And they had to go convince the head of the whole Japanese Yakuza to say, "Look, I know you guys got cyber, you got hackers. We need to borrow them." And it took a lot of convincing for the Yakuza leader to give up his resources. But because these alliances form. Now, if you remember when Russia invaded Ukraine, one of the very first things that came out publicly was the Ukrainian president and some of the cabinet members turning to the Iranian underground and say, "All's forgiven. We need you all to defend our country." So all the hackers of Ukraine mobilized to go after the Russians. Well, what do you think the Russian underground did? They got mobilized by the Russian government saying, "All is forgiven. You're not going to go to prison. We need you temporarily to do this." So a big part of the book talks about these temporary alliances of the Laotian hackers helping the Russians working with the Chinese very briefly, and the fact that the Japanese Yakuza came to help Jack and his son, kind of do some counter hacking as well. But in truth, there is a lot of those dark things that happen along the dark web, which is sort of the kind of like the underground internet. There's a lot of hackers that are there that put their services up for rent for Bitcoin, and that happens every day. And many times they get hired by governments, they get hired by corporations. Lately, they've been getting hired by private personnel to say, go after this guy who wrote this story about me, or go after my ex-wife, or go after this or whatever. But there is a tremendous underground economy of hackers getting hacked. Many of them come from USC, New York University, Cornell, Columbia, Georgetown, and they master their craft, and they, just like everybody else, they're an entrepreneur. They throw it out there on the dark net, and they do get hired to do some things.
Wow.
I think what would be really cool is, since you know, it was talked about getting younger people involved in it. There's two things that I think it could be compared to. If you guys lean into it, it'd be cool. The one is like the Force, right? Because when you guys are training people, you don't know if this person's going to stay on the light, you know, on the white side, the white hat side, or if they're going to flip to the black hat side, or if they're going to be in the gray somewhere. And then the other thing is, like, this is like New Age mercenaries, you know? It's services for hire, and it could be anything from something as simple as shutting down someone's website or defending a country in war. Like, those are two pretty cool things that, like, in pop culture can, like, it's kind of like the Hackers movie from the 90s got everyone interested in computers in the 90s. We need something like that now to get people interested in IT and cybersecurity.
So if your son or daughter were a hacker who went over to the dark side, would you disown them?
No.
No.
All right. Well, it depends what they're doing it depends on what they're doing on the dark net. If they're trafficking humans, disowned.
It was a callback joke, Stephen. Let it go.
Yeah. And the real and Ortiz, you're definitely dead on. It's when they actually recruit talent, they're doing now in middle school. These kids grew up now with iPads in kindergarten. They have a phone by the time they're in the third grade. They're more tech. Everything around the house is technical. The games, everything they're doing is all tech. The watches, everything's all techie now. So to find talent is not hard. Now, truth be told, every white hat hacker has been on the dark side. Every dark side hacker has moved over to the white for various reasons, because it all comes down to alliances. How much trouble is a hacker in? He's looking at 10 to 20. What do you think he's going to do? By the way, I can help. You know, we'll work something out. And that does happen. That was actually in the movie Black Cat, you know, where the guy was in prison, and the Chinese and the FBI went to prison and got him out and says, we need you. There's a bigger problem here. The one thing about cyber terrorism, there's always a bigger problem. It either it's a power grid, a warship getting hacked, an F-22 getting hacked, an airline plane getting hacked. So when they look at who's out there available to help potentially solve the problem, it's not always clean-cut, Harvard-looking, shirt-tying people. It's people in a coffee shop with dark sunglasses on and long hair that are just jamming away on their keyboard. That could very well be a hacker.
Well, I think it's crazy that this is one of the few This is one of the few ways that crime can pay, because you hear sometimes where, like, some of these hackers who are breaking into companies maliciously get caught, and the company's like, "Hey, you know what? Listen, go to prison, or we can bring you on at $250K a year, and you can help us find the rest of our vulnerabilities." I know that's happened with, like, Microsoft and all of them. Like, so nuts to think about, though.
Edward Snowden is watching this program right now and slitting his wrist, saying, "What about me?" But I've never been in a Starbucks where I haven't been suspicious of everybody in the room. Like all those laptops, I'm looking like, "Well, what are you hacking? What are you doing?" Because if you were, why do you go to? So, you know, this first of all, I just want a useless joke that I thought of before. The Laotian hackers, they're called dirty louse.
Yes.
I went over like now. I don't, because I know your first thing, Sunrise and Saigon. We talked a lot about Vietnam. I've been dealing with a lot of programmers in Vietnam. We don't think of that area of the world as a technological threat, but they are very advanced in computer warfare, computer science, just generally. Is that by nature? Is the government encouraging that, like, or is it just like something that the economics drove that?
It's both. So Vietnam does have a huge IT community in Da Nang. Google, Apple, Microsoft have invested billions in developing talent. FTP, which is their largest IT company in all of Vietnam, is now in multiple countries, including the United States. They go out and recruit talent as well. Vietnam is actually very interesting because Vietnam has a very large hacking community. It's why I featured them in the book called the Laotian, or I call them Emerald Forest is the code name for them. They have an extraordinary amount of talent. Now, truth be told, in Thailand and in Laos and in Cambodia, they have a lot of cyber talent, except that was all developed by organized crime. It was not developed by the government. So the whole lines bleed over very, very quickly. It's really hard to say there's borders of talent. It really isn't. It really is kind of like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a universal currency of money that has no government association. It's sort of a free flowing everywhere and everywhere. Everyone takes Bitcoin. That's why hacking is kind of the same way. You could be Laotian and next day you're in South Africa hacking for a gold miner, right? I mean, it's just such a borderless type of reality that we're facing. And by the way, this has been around for years. This is not something new. I mean, hacking goes back to the 1960s, right? And it started with, Russians going into NASA and taking away those reel-to-reel tapes with them and stuffing it in their shirts and, running out the door type of stuff. So this isn't new. It's just becoming a bigger problem because everything has become so digital.
Yeah, the Bitcoin, the crypto stuff. We say Bitcoin. A lot of people say Bitcoin to really encompass anything crypto. It has me totally confused. My wife is an investor and basically watches the markets every day. I don't understand the whole concept of mining and blockchain. Like, could I mine Bitcoin?
Yes,
I could.
Yes, but you have to have a very, very high-end computer and lots of power because it generates it requires lots of energy to do mining. The concept of mining is very simple. When somebody does a transaction and it gets recorded, now what makes Bitcoin secure is that think of yourself as when you write a manual check and you record it into one ledger, right? It's your ledger. You open your old checkbook, you say, oh, I'm groceries $50, and you write it into a ledger, right? Bitcoin writes it 12 times. 12 times somewhere in the world, it is a distributed ledger. Now, that means the transaction has to match all 12 ledgers, and it uses a cryptography and it uses some key security crypto to mark the transaction as valid. Miners validate all 12 of those transactions. And once they say, this is cool, then the transaction goes through and the assets change hands. So think of having to go into the DMV with your title of your car and 12 people have to say, yep, that's legit, make it go. If one person says, no, that's a typo. Somebody wrote over the title, it's invalid. So miners are the ones that validate the transaction to make sure that the integrity is there, make sure that it's recorded properly. Now, the reason they call it blockchain is one block transaction has to link to another transaction and then links to another transaction. And this is why you see these massive data centers being built in Northern Virginia over by Dulles Airport, because many of them, you have to have tremendous amount of computing power. This is why NVIDIA's stock went through the ceiling, is because you need to have massive computing to be able to do block ledger, blockchain ledgers. So your wife, when she invests in it and she says, I now want to do something with this coin, whatever it is, that transaction is recorded in 12 different digital locations. And then the miners get paid. Miners are paid to do the validation of the transactions through mathematical calculations. And any one of them could say, no, this is not clean. The asset never changes hands. And that's kind of what makes Bitcoin very safe.
Does it make it very safe, or does it make it subject to all of those people? One bad actor in all it can screw it up for a lot of people.
No, it really takes the computing power. This is why it's not really, you're not looking at a piece of paper or a computer screen and going, this. It literally is the computing power it takes to crack 12 ledgers doesn't exist yet. Now, with quantum computing coming, which is the next big thing, quantum computing supposedly it has the ability to crack, crypto, but it hasn't happened yet. So you would have to go out and be bigger than a country right now in order to have the resources, the computing power resources to crack Bitcoin. And
well,
it hasn't
depending
been
on
done
what
yet.
country, I'm bigger than Pego Pego.
No, it would take a nation state of China, North Korea, Vietnam, and the United States, and that's why you're seeing a rush to people investing in quantum computing, because that theoretically could break it. Now, remember, Bitcoin eventually is going to end. Bitcoin is based on a computation of available coins that were originally set out by Sakamoto himself years ago. So supposedly Bitcoin is going to come to an end at some point. And it's not yet, but it was, because eventually we run out of Bitcoin numbers. So that's why you're seeing a rush for all this other cryptocurrency to be introduced. But all that is based on blockchain. It's all based on this high, in crypto security. But to the date, no one has successfully hacked the ledgers. What they have hacked is people's digital wallets that are on their phones. Those are not just. Yes.
And not just that, but it's even more secure than like a regular bank would be.
Yes.
Think about it. Because I mean, you have teenagers who can hack into a bank with with a Walmart laptop with no issue, versus, like he said, there's no computing power available to break the blockchain, meaning that your Bitcoin theoretically is the most secure currency on the planet right now, because it can't just be jumped into so far. Yeah, like that's nuts to think about.
That's incredible that he got that right. He's very stoned at this moment. Man, so all this stuff you incorporate into writing a novel. I mean, good for you. I mean, you obviously have a world of experience that ties into this stuff. It's not your typical spy novel, and I even I don't think Clancy ever went there. I mean, I remember there was some elements of cybersecurity in some of this stuff, but I don't think anybody has gone this deep into writing spy novels. Am I correct in that?
Well, a lot of people do write about Bitcoin. There's a lot of even some of the ghostwriters that write for James Patterson and others do incorporate this because they realize this is
you just blew my mind. James Patterson is using ghostwriters? Really?
Maybe.
What? Yeah, maybe. Allegedly.
Wait for it to come out on the wait for it to come out on the dark net. But writers, an example like a James Patterson potentially may be using a ghostwriter to write some of his pieces, or maybe a contributing pieces of his work. Because how else do you put out 3 books a month or 3 books a quarter? I have no idea, but that's for a different day. But the idea of this type of writing, hacking has been in books before. Hackers have been in movies. Bitcoin is still relatively new to people, so to incorporate that was sort of a new angle I wanted in this book. The other one was really the real central theme was this is setting up for obviously another book later, but it's really about explaining to people about the underground. Now, there's another clip that's coming on Labor Day weekend that shows me walking in Taiwan with my camera kind of like this, and it says, did China really hack into an underground fiber optic cabling in the water? And that's kind of the basis of the book, is China hacks into a fiber optic cabling between Taiwan and they use it as a hacking tool. Newsweek did an article 3 months ago that said, is China really hacking into underwater fiber? Talk about impeccable timing of life, right? So I actually incorporate that in my launch on Labor Day weekend. So that was a real world event that I didn't even know existed. I started writing this book 3 years ago. And I came up with the idea of Dragon Vault and the whole hacking of fiber optic cabling and whatever. And then my dad actually sent me a link going, hey, by the way, you should see this Newsweek article that just came out that China's hacking into underwater fiber. So when people read this book and they go, oh my God. So my very first beta reviewer was a woman who was at the CIA for 24 years. And she's a friend. She's been on my podcast as well, and she's written a tremendous amount of spy novels and things. So she was the first beta reader of this of Shores, and she wrote such a. That's why I feature her in that video. You know, she's that lady getting on the plane. She was actually a CIA officer for several years, and I gave her the book early and say, "Tell me how real this is," and she goes, "Oh my God, you don't know how many surfaces have you scratched by writing the book the way you did." So I think when people read this, they're going to be like, "God, the authenticity of this book is fantastic," but they're all going to be asking the same question they did in the first book: how much of it is real, how much of it is not, and I'm going to leave it up to the reader to figure that out. But yeah, a good amount of the stuff in the book is going to be like people are going to be raising their eyebrows, going, "Where did that come from?" Well,
is that good, or is that make you look over your shoulder, like who might be paying attention to you at this point?
So that's a great question, Dog, because the opening part of the book is China hacking Taiwan, and that happens every day. And part of the reason that I put that in the book is I'm a huge advocate of Taiwan, and I have a lot of friends, family, people that I've known that live there. And so that really raised a lot of eyebrows with the publisher because, like, are you sure you want to do this? You're going to piss somebody off. I said, well, when do you not piss people off in this world, right? And so I think if the Chinese government reads my book, I think that they'll be a little bit offended, but also at the same time, the person behind the hack on the Chinese side is a general who's very rogue, and he's going off of the narrative, "Hey, I'm trying to take down Taiwan. Leave me alone." And everybody kind of leaves him alone. They don't give a crap what he's doing until later in the book when they realize, going, wait a minute, the World Bank just shut off our funding because you're doing something. What did you do? So they actually turn against him at the end of the book. So it does have a lead in a little bit, but reality though is China does hack Taiwan every day of the week. That's not even fiction. That's a nonfiction reality. And then the fact that now that we found that China has been hacking underwater fiber cables, all that is real. So I'm not like creating some story that makes them look bad. It sort of just takes a real world reality and just makes a little fiction of it.
Right. On the geopolitical outlook of this stuff, are you an optimist for Taiwan's independence, or staying out of, not being, just eaten up by China?
Well, it's going to come down to who really is on the side of Taiwan, because China's done an interesting job for the years now getting countries to disassociate from them. I think there's only less than 13 countries now that actually acknowledge Taiwan. And as that number keeps dwindling, it does make it interesting. Now, the fact that China or Taiwan just beat Taiwan in, what was it, badminton in the Olympics last weekend, I mean, that just sent off, fireworks all over the world. And I think every time you hear stories of this, I was in Taiwan very recently, and I was there when they had the Chinese ships were in the north, and you could see the MiGs flying around and stuff. So it definitely is a saber rattling. But part of the book also covers a little story of the Japanese prime minister leaning on one of his hacking guys saying, hey, could you help my homies down south a little bit, if you don't mind? And that stuff happens every day. So there's an alliance of South Koreans, Japanese, Filipinos, Vietnamese, United States, Australia, New Zealand, and Germany now that are getting sick of what China's doing in the South China Sea.
You're writing yourself into insomnia. No, I wouldn't. I'd just be like completely full of anxiety if I were writing about the things you're writing.
Well, but when you read the truth, when you read what happens out there, it's not going to be they're going to show up one day and pull into Taipei Harbor, with their boats and unload troops like it is like in Star Wars or something like that, where the Empire invaded. No, I think they're trying cyber. They try to intimidate. They try to economically isolate. But then suddenly this country that didn't even have a flag in the Olympics wins a gold medal against China. Right? It was really that was profound. But I don't think I think it's going to continue to be what it is today. I think you're going to see saber rattling going on for years. I think at some point, if China finally gets sick of the whole thing, I think they're going to find there's going to be 5 or 6 people in the vicinity of that island to say, are you really sure you want to do this? Right? I think if it was back in the 70s when everyone started disowning them and said after Tiananmen Square, oh, you know what, we're in China, we're not in Taiwan. That was probably more of a vulnerable time. But now because Taiwan is such an economic powerhouse, I think it's going to be very hard for China to do that.
Yeah. You just reminded me of the Able Archers. Brian, I can't remember Brian's last name at the moment. I want to say Adams, but that's not Brian Adams. It might have been on Brian Adams. So the Able Archers is the name of the book, but it details one guy in the Russian military who saved us from World War III, basically with that question, are you really sure you want to do this? Because he was the guy who developed the system that went astray and said that the United States had just launched a massive nuclear strike against the USSR, but it was wrong. But they were ready to retaliate, and he was the first guy to say, wait, are you really sure you want to do this? Because we can't really trust this thing. And basically avoided World War III by saying, just wait a few seconds. But, counting on one person or even just a small group of people to be the voice of reason in times of military anxiety or tension, it leaves the world in a really a delicate place to be to remain. When we talk about global peace and all that kind of stuff, and avoiding nuclear war, cyber war. What's worse, in your opinion, nuclear war or this idea of
a cyber? A cyber can, I mean, to kind of feed on what you just said, Dog. If China decides to come across the strait and go after Taiwan, the cyber underground will mobilize globally and take on China. And China is prepared. China has one of the biggest cyber groups in the world. Their PLA Cyber is one of the largest cyber functions in the world. The warfare, it would not happen the way we would think. It'd be very similar to what we're seeing with Ukraine and Russia right now. There's a lot of bombs dropping and people are suffering and there's a lot of things. But what we don't see is what's happening on the digital side underground, right? There could be a lot of hackers in the world that don't want China to take over Taiwan, and they immediately mobilize their resources, which means they're starting to hack China on the back end to prevent China from mobilizing. So I think that when people look at the difference between nuclear war, which takes out millions of people, but you could shut down a water system in a country and within hours could have bacteria. That could be a lasting problem, right? So but I do think that cyber, because it's becoming global and it's becoming a opportunistic, and that's one of the things I covered in the book. That's one of the themes of Shores of Okinawa, was the fact that you had all these underground hackers that either mobilized temporarily to help the Chinese, but you also had hackers mobilized to help, the Americans and the Japanese and the Koreans. So that sort of underlining fabric is here to stay, and I think it's just going to keep getting bigger as more people get into technology.
I'm looking at Sunrise in Saigon, and I'm looking for a book, something that says all formats. See all formats. Here it is. Is it available in audiobook? Because your books have been compared to the Stephen, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You asked that question after this, but your books have been compared to Tom Clancy stuff. I really enjoy the audiobooks for the Tom Clancy stuff. Are your books available in audio format?
So what I did is I relaunched the first book, which originally was named Sunrise in Saigon. The new copy is called Forever Sunrise in Saigon, and that is coming out August 14th. So I actually redid the book. I kind of relaunched the book. I did some editing and cleaning up and all sorts of things with the publisher. So the publisher and I agreed a year ago to take the old book off the internet in order to revamp it. I mean, there was grammar issues and kind of the storyline needed to change a little bit. So the relaunch of Sunrise in Saigon actually will be August 14th. There will be an audiobook coming probably in October for that. But that book will come out August 14th. Shores of Okinawa, which is due to launch on Labor Day weekend, 2 weeks later. Now, the original book that you remember, I was on your original show, that's more of a romantic book. That was the original Sunrise in Saigon, was very romantic between Jack and Lynn and his affair going over to Taiwan, to Vietnam. This book, Shores, is all cyber thriller and suspense. So it's a different genre. So that's why I am having the ability to release 2 books within the same month. Is one's going to go towards the romantic side of the world, and the other one is going to go towards the cyber thriller side of the world.
Gotcha. Mr. Stoner, libertarian loser. You had a question.
All right. So even though you completely ruined the illusion of your name with giving us your real name, this might be the first I guess fiction novel that we've had on here so far that I'm probably going to pick up, just because the hacker thing is like super in my wheelhouse. It's super interesting to me. Bitcoin thing's super interesting. I would want to obtain a signed copy.
Oh, I would absolutely, when the book gets published on August 30th, which is Labor Day weekend, I have 50 copies coming, and I will send copies to you, to the dog, and to Mr. Kane as well. I'd be more than happy to send an autograph copy to you.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Because like I said, I'm not a huge fiction guy. That's the thing. It's I prefer reading history or maybe even some sort of reference material. That's just what I like to read. But yours just kind of hits everything that does interest me when it comes to fiction. So I'm super excited to read it. So
yeah, no, I'd be more than happy to send you.
That would be fantastic.
No,
yeah,
and
don't smoke a whole ounce before you read the book.
I don't know. Just based off what I heard, it might be a little better.
After you read the book, you want to get.
I'll read it first, then I'll reread it enhanced, and we'll see what happens.
Okay. Steven, you know that kind of coffee that begins with the letter E. It's like the fancy coffee. How would you pronounce that word? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Espresso.
Espresso. You say espresso.
Espresso.
You don't even have an E in front of it. I was just curious because some people say espresso like there's an X in it.
Well, yeah, I said espresso, like ESS. Yeah, and there's no X.
Yes.
Yeah, no, people say espresso. The reason I bring this up is Patrick is a coffee enthusiast, and he had sent me some espresso.
Yes.
And now when I look, because in my keyword tool in YouTube for this program, it actually had espresso, espresso. I was like, wow, we got people from Brooklyn programming the algorithm on YouTube. Where did the coffee?
Espresso,
Yeah, where did you was that from your days as being in cybersecurity, where you were, basically living on coffee? Where does your love affair with coffee come from?
Ooh, well, yeah, I could drink three. I drink 3 triple espressos a day, morning, day, and night. I sleep perfectly. I don't have any sleep issues. I drink it before I get on a plane. I've always been a big espresso drinker. Part of the reason that I started the coffee line, which is cyclerider3espresso.com, was as a fundraiser. So every book that I write has a benefactor. The first book, Forever Our Sunrise Saigon, Helmets for Kids, is a charity in Vietnam that helps produce helmets for children. So all the coffee proceeds and my book proceeds go to that charity. And then last year I raised about $2,000, which roughly about 250 helmets for kids last year. Because in Vietnam, kids are getting wiped out all over the place from motor scooters, and many of them don't wear helmets. So that was that charity. So a lot of the coffee sales go to that. Now in this book, Shores of Okinawa, my benefactor is called helpoki.org, which is a nonprofit started in Okinawa by an ex-Marine as well, because I'm also a Marine as well, that is trying to end poverty in Okinawa. So he has made himself a thrift store, community service, community outreach, food bank, abused women's center as well in Okinawa. And so when I was in Okinawa taking pictures and doing video and capturing stuff with my son, we got a chance to meet him and had a chance to sit down with him. And he told me about his, the organization, how many women and families they've helped, and how poverty is still a big problem in Okinawa. So the benefactor of Shores of Okinawa is going to be helpoki.org. And so I created a Shores of Okinawa coffee. I have a Sunrise and Sunset coffee as well. I have some mugs, but all those proceeds go to help those charities.
Very cool. Now I started Mind